again. I'm laughing at clouds, so
He turned rain into music and sidewalks into stages. Say his name, Gene Kelly, and the mind answers with a hat tipped to the sky, a grin bright as a marquee and choreography that made the whole world lighter on its feet. But when the spotlights cooled and the studio gates swung shut, another story waited in the quiet, a story the cameras rarely caught. Behind the myth lived a father with 3 children whose lives unfolded far from the soundstage, beyond the reach of publicity stills and fan magazines. Were they protected by his fame or eclipsed by it? Why do their timelines come to us in fragments, their milestones brushed over, their voices barely heard above the applause that never seemed to end? In the golden age image was everything clean, lines clean, narratives, no rough edges. What happens to a family when perfection is the product and the product must never crack? Tonight, we pull back the velvet curtain and step into the wings, following footprints that begin in Hollywood but vanish into ordinary streets. If a legend can make millions feel seen, why do the closest faces in his own home appear so hard to find? Gene Kelly's family story begins not on the stage but at home, where 3 children were born into the glow and the shadows of one of Hollywood's brightest stars. His first marriage to actress Betsy Blair produced a daughter, Carrie, in 1942, right as Kelly's career was taking flight. While the press celebrated the union of a rising choreographer and an ambitious actress, few paused to ask what life was like for the little girl growing up in the wings of fame. Carrie's childhood was marked by her father's soaring career and her mother's battle with Hollywood's blacklist, a household of talent, but also tension where applause came from outside the house, rarely within. Later, with dancer Gene Kelly had 2 more children, Bridget and Timothy, arriving in the early 1960s, when he was already a household name, no longer the hungry young performer, but a legend fiercely protecting his image. These children entered a world where their father was more myth than man, where their presence in public records was blurred, erased, or never even acknowledged. So while audiences adored Gene Kelly for his charm, his family remained curiously absent. No staged photographs, no glowing tributes, no perfect family spread in magazines. It's as though the man who taught the world to dance in the rain built walls around his private life so high that even his children were left in the shadows. And within those shadows grew 3 very different fates: one daughter who turned her back on fame, another who seemed to vanish altogether, and a son whose silence remains one of Hollywood's deepest mysteries. Number 3, Carrie Kelly, the daughter who chose silence. Carrie Kelly was born in 1942, the first child of Gene Kelly and actress Betsy Blair. At the time, her father was still carving his place in Hollywood, a young man whose talent promised greatness, but who had not yet become a legend. For Carrie, this meant her earliest years unfolded in the glow of possibility, yet also in the turbulence of 2 ambitious parents, whose marriage was often described as a battle of egos. As a child, Carrie longed for recognition from the man who mesmerized the world with every step. There is a haunting story whispered among those who worked on the set of Invitation to the Dance. Carrie, just 7 years old, was brought to watch her father perform. She stood for hours in a pale blue dress, waiting, hoping to be noticed. But when the cameras stopped rolling, Gene Kelly walked right past her without a glance. A lighting technician later murmured, "I don't think he even realized it was his daughter." For Carrie, that moment would set the tone of their relationship. She was present but unseen. As she grew older, the distance only deepened. At Hollywood parties, she was introduced as Betsy's child, rarely Gene's daughter. The spotlight that dazzled millions cast her into near invisibility. In her teens, she tried once to close the gap. She enrolled in a film workshop where her father was guest of honor. Sitting quietly in the 3rd row, dressed in white, she waited to see if he would recognize her. His eyes scanned the room, paused briefly on her, and then moved on. He spoke for nearly an hour about art, passion, and film. Not once did the word family leave his lips. When he left the stage, he did not look back. Carrie walked home that night, telling her mother, "I'm never going back to his world." Instead, Carrie built a life on her own terms. She studied sociology at Yale, pursued academia, and became a respected voice in cultural and human rights discussions. Her writings carried sharp reflections on identity and invisibility. In one essay, she noted, "I thought the spotlight was meant to reveal the truth. I was wrong. It blinds us from what lies beyond its frame. Though she rarely mentioned her father, the pain of erasure spoke through her words. The press occasionally tried to drag her back into Gene Kelly's orbit. In 1994, People magazine ran a piece exposing her as the daughter the legend never acknowledged. The article vanished within 48 hours, rumored to have been pulled under pressure from Kelly's inner circle. Carrie herself never commented. When asked once in a private seminar how her father influenced her thinking, she answered coldly, "He taught me one thing: you can be adored by the entire world, yet fail the one person who needed you most." Today, Carrie lives quietly in Massachusetts, teaching and writing far from Hollywood's glitter. She has refused all offers to pen a memoir. When pressed, she smiles faintly and says, "I'm the story Hollywood never wanted to tell." Carrie Kelly's life is not a tale of scandal, but of silence, a silence louder than applause, echoing across decades. For her, the tragedy was not being the daughter of Gene Kelly, but never truly being seen by him. Number 2, Bridget Kelly, the daughter erased from the frame. If Carrie's story was one of silence, Bridget's was one of disappearance. Born in the early 1960s to Gene Kelly and his second wife dancer, Jean Coyne, Bridget entered the world at a time when her father was no longer the eager young star, but a Hollywood institution. By then, Gene Kelly had perfected not just his craft, but his image. Every interview, every photograph, every appearance was tightly controlled. And in that polished narrative, there was no room for imperfections, or, as it seemed for Bridget, almost nothing official exists about her. No glossy studio portraits, no family features in Life magazine, no affectionate mentions in interviews. Insiders whisper that MGM once archived a handful of behind-the-scenes photographs showing a small girl with striking eyes standing beside her famous father. Each print was marked with a blunt stamp, "Not for release." In Hollywood, erasure can be as deliberate as the click of a shutter, never published. Her childhood was marked by absence and secrecy. A former classmate from Beverly Hills High School once described her anonymously as beautiful but afraid of being seen. She refused to pose for class pictures and often deflected questions about her family. When asked directly, she would answer with a chilling half-joke, "I'm not a public figure, I don't exist." Tragedy struck early. Bridget's mother, Jean Coyne, died of cancer in 1973, leaving the girl just 11 years old. Already isolated, she retreated further into the shadows. Neighbors recalled blinds drawn tight in the Kelly home, a girl who only slipped outside in the early mornings, vanishing before the day began. Rumors swirl that by her teenage years, Bridget suffered a deep psychological crisis. Some say she was quietly treated in a private facility in Santa Barbara. Records sealed her name, hidden under anonymity. In one fragment of a leaked hospital note, a patient claimed, "I was born to serve my father's image, but I am not a movie." What became of Bridget after those lost years remains a mystery. Some believe she moved north, living under a different name in a small Oregon town, teaching art to children with special needs. Others insist she died young, her passing kept secret to preserve Gene Kelly's carefully guarded legacy. Still others claim she never left the California house, a ghost haunting her own past. What makes her story so haunting is not just the uncertainty, but the silence of those around her. Gene Kelly never spoke her name in public. Biographers skirt around her existence. Even fans who devoted their lives to documenting every detail of the star's career admit it's as though she was written out of the script. Bridget Kelly's life is a reminder of how easily a person can be erased when their existence threatens the myth of perfection. A daughter who might have had every opportunity was instead hidden away, her narrative smudged into rumor and conjecture. In the end, she became the embodiment of invisible pain, proof that sometimes the brightest legends cast the darkest shadows. Number 1. Timothy Kelly, the son who was never taught to dance. If Bridget's story is one of disappearance, Timothy's is one of heartbreak. Born in 1962, Gene Kelly's only son came into the world when his father was already a global icon, a man whose very name meant rhythm, elegance, and joy. To the public, it seemed inevitable. The boy would inherit his father's gift, the same quick feet, the same irresistible charm. But inside the Kelly household, the reality was far harsher. From the start, Timothy was kept at arm's length from the world of dance. Staff in the Kelly home recalled that the studio door was always locked whenever the boy came near. He was never invited to watch rehearsals, never given the chance to learn a single step from the master. One longtime housemaid remembered bitterly there was music every night, but none of it was for him. As a teenager, Timothy tried to break through the wall. When his father was serving as a consultant on a television production, Timothy asked for the smallest of roles just to walk across the stage. Gene refused. The note written in the production files was blunt, no theatrical talent. To anyone else, those words might be a technical judgment. But to his son, they were a sentence confirmation that he would never be enough in his father's eyes. That rejection carved deep scars. In Gene Kelly's personal photo archive, there are hundreds of images of co-stars of glamorous parties, of cinematic triumphs. But of Timothy, only one a snapshot at age 6, staring at the camera while his father looks away. It is a picture that speaks volumes, a permanent reminder of absence in the presence of so much glory. Rumors followed Timothy into adulthood. Some claimed he was involved in a motorcycle accident in the mid-1990s, just months before his father's death. Others insist he disappeared into anonymity, perhaps living in the Northwest under an untraceable name. A former classmate wrote on a private blog years later, Timothy carried a wound no one could see. He didn't want fame. He just wanted to be loved like a normal child. What is known is that when Gene Kelly's will was revealed in 1997, Timothy was nowhere to be found, not as an heir, not as a keeper of his father's image, not even in a passing mention. His absence was total. For a man who spent his life choreographing perfection, perhaps family did not fit the routine. And yet Timothy's story lingers precisely because it was never allowed to fully exist. The son of a legend who was never given the first step, never given the embrace he so desperately sought, remains a shadowy figure rumored, whispered about, but never claimed. In a bitter irony, while Gene Kelly taught the world to dance in the rain, he never taught his own son how to take even a single step by his side. Gene Kelly will forever be remembered as the man who made the world smile through movement, a genius who turned sidewalks into stages, and storms into symphonies. Yet behind the curtain of lies a family story. Hollywood has long avoided a story of three children who never basked in the glow of his spotlight. Carrie the daughter who refused to be invisible yet chose silence over spectacle, became a scholar whose words carried the pain of never being acknowledged. Bridget the daughter erased from records, became a ghost in her own life. Proof that image can sometimes bury truth. And Timothy the son who bore the Kelly name but not his embrace, carried the deepest wound of all to grow up surrounded by music, but denied a father's dance. Their stories force us to confront a difficult truth. Fame is often built on sacrifice, and sometimes the heaviest price is not by the star, but by those standing nearest to the glow. For every dazzling scene Gene Kelly gave the world, there was a quiet void at home, 3 lives left in shadow, so the legend could shine without blemish. Perhaps that is the unspoken lesson of the Kelly children. Applause fades. Awards gather dust. But the absence of love within a family reverberates louder than any ovation. And if even a man who made millions laugh could leave behind such silence, then maybe the measure of greatness is not what we create on the stage, but the embraces we give when no one is watching. In remembering Carrie, Bridget, and Timothy, we remember that behind every icon, human hearts fragile, longing, and deserving to be seen. Their legacy is not a fame, but of the reminder that even legends are incomplete without love.